Pop those drinks. It's time for Sports Around the Bar. Hey guys, welcome into Sports Around the Bar, the only sports talk show. See, I flubbed it. Let's restart. The only sports talk show that cares about what you think, and we have a lot to cover today. You can obviously tell. I got someone else sitting with me here at the bar. I think it's because Drew's not here. It just threw me all the way off.
Yeah.
We're glad to have you back, though,
Thank
Hannah.
you.
We're glad that you're here to talk a lot of college football and a little bit of pro, because we've had a lot of news coming out here. Is there any kind of pro football story that you're excited to talk about first?
I mean, when I was here last week, we talked about Zeke Elliott probably most of the time. NFL talk, of course. Dallas Cowboys, we were talking about what kind of guy he was, if he's going to be a guy to stay, to leave. Of course, there's other guys in the mix are now looking to get an extension, looking to get a good contract. But Zeke Elliott, overpaid or underpaid? What do you think?
I think, again, the flashy $90 million contract. We'll start with Zeke, and then obviously we're going to talk Zeke. We also want to talk about Jared Goff getting paid, Antonio Brown upset about his fines. So topical, because I was just complaining yesterday about what happens when teams fine their players. Yep. But you're right. New helmet as well with Antonio Brown. We're going to talk about him as well. Then we're going to go over everything that happened last week in college football, as well as what to expect and the games to watch for week 2. We've got all that to talk about. Going back to Zeke, like you wanted to talk about, and I like to talk about him too. Even though we've been talking a lot of Zeke here lately, I'm finally glad this saga is at an end. And as for price, I think the Cowboys won this deal. Even though everyone's shocked by that $90 million contract, the $50 million of it that is guaranteed, which is about half, little over half, is almost entirely promised to him in the first 4 years of this contract, which means you're getting Zeke from years 24, age 24, I should say. To age 28.
Which is pretty crazy. Imagine if, because I'm 27. How old are you?
I'm also 27.
Okay, perfect. Imagine 3 years ago, we got paid this much money to do this. It blows my mind. And it's not even that much compared to baseball. You look at what baseball guys are getting.
They make
at 18 years old, getting triple-digit millions, right? But yeah, Ezekiel Elliott, it's crazy to me, though, because now we used to talk about Todd Gurley like this. Like, Todd was the guy who was getting paid. People are like, is he worth every penny? I mean, at one point, he was getting $45 million guaranteed. But now, Ezekiel Elliott, the question I guess I have for you is this. Do you look at him and say, he is the perfect running back for the Dallas Cowboys? Do you think with Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield that the Cowboys truly have a chance to win a Super Bowl this year?
I think they have a better chance of getting there. I don't think they're the best team, but sometimes they're a good enough team now that if the breaks go your way in the playoffs, you can win the Super Bowl. James, man, good to see you. I'll talk about the Texans in just a sec. The whole last episode we spent almost talking about the Texans and the Laramie Tunsil trade, as well as some of these others like the Clowney deal. We're not big fans of it. That'll be the spoiler alert. We're not huge fans of what Houston has done so far with their trading, but things could be a lot worse. Going back to the Zeke Elliott thing, again, you now have all the power with the Cowboys because your window stays open. And it won't ruin your team if everything falls apart or you decide you want to rebuild, because they can get to that year 4, and then they pay a $6.7 million cap penalty, which will save about that much to cut him, and he's gone. So this is, again, the Cowboys, they put out that shock number. Everyone's like, man, I don't know if he's worth $90 million. The odds of Zeke Elliott ever seeing $90 million are pretty slim. Exactly. He's probably going to get that 50, which is fully guaranteed, short of him retiring. He's going to see the 50. He might even see 65 or 70 if he gets to play an extra year or two, and the Cowboys decide.
Healthy.
Exactly. And the Cowboys now get to sit back. They don't have to guarantee that, saying, if you get hurt, we don't give you anything. It's the reverse. He has a 4-year, $50 million contract, essentially, where he's going to make about $12.5 a year. After that, it's off to the races for the Cowboys. If he's good, you keep him, and you get him for about the same price. If he's bad, you give him the boot, and then you start over again. So I think the Cowboys won this 100%. I don't know that they're a Super Bowl team, but I think this is the kind of move that keeps you in contention. And this is also the kind of move that could potentially keep more contracts on the board for you.
Yeah, I think this is a move that also kept him happy, and that was kind of the biggest thing. I mean, you look at guys, and obviously there's more we're going to talk about here with deals and things, but I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think Cowboys won this. I think it was a little too drawn out, in my opinion. And for a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, I think in his mind, he's like, oh, this is a win, $90 million. But I think when you break it down and how he's going to get it and what's the case and how when he'll get it, I agree. I think Cowboys completely won this one.
Yep. Also, Scott's asking, he wonders if Dallas put in a no holdout clause. Scott, every one of those contracts has it where if you don't report at this time, when it's your time to report, we're going to fine you. And then most teams back off of those fines when the guys come back. Let's talk about what a team doesn't, because I was saying last episode that no team or no good team should want to go into this season by trying to find one of their players, because all you're doing is creating bad blood. You may need to re-sign them, and this is going to come back up in their memory. Also, when you're luring free agents and they see, hey, Antonio Brown, for example, we're going to talk about this here. complained or stayed out of practice. The team threatened to fine him. When he came back, the team followed through. That can chase away free agents from you. I think that's a bad thing for a team to do. It's always the threat you want to have, but you never want to ever go through with it. What does $54,000 that Antonio Brown is going to be fined? That's a drop in the bucket to a billion-dollar organization like the Raiders. To me, I think they'd be better off just pushing it under the rug, saying, look, Antonio, you get in practice, you follow the schedule that we set, we'll waive all that. If not, then maybe you fine him at the end of the season for all what he's missed. I think this is a terrible step by the Raiders and sets a bad precedent for a team that's likely to be active in free agency going forward.
I mean, I don't know if y'all saw on Twitter, Instagram, the note that Antonio Brown posted on his own Instagram. But in my opinion, I think what they're trying to do, and we'll talk about this later on with Nick Saban in Alabama, because I think he still has the same kind of mindset, is just trying to keep your guys disciplined, trying to keep control, trying to make you as the owner, the coach, whoever, have control and make them be like, listen, you're a part of a team. You have to abide by rules. And Antonio Brown's kind of, I think, teetering that line between arrogance and being a humble player. And you see moments where he's wanting to grow. You see moments where he is growing. But you also see moments where he's arrogant and he's going to get his way. And I think this is kind of what you would see when you have grown children, grown babies, right? You see guys that think they can get away with anything. And I think this is kind of a way for them to be like, not necessarily. Because if you look, he was previously fined $40,000 for missing the Raiders' preseason training camp. That was August 18th.
Right.
So it wasn't like it was his first thing. I mean, you missed that. You missed a walkthrough on the 22nd. That was honestly $13,950 that he was fined for that. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, call it as it is. But when you're an athlete, and I see this all about in college, when you go to the University of Alabama, the University of Oregon, Washington State, wherever you go, your one job is to be an athlete. You're not having to work at a gas station or at Chick-fil-A or wherever. Obviously, my pleasure, right? You don't work there. Your one job is being an athlete. Abide by the rules. And if you cannot simply do the things that they ask you to do, then, I mean, that's what happened. We'll go over that a little bit with Nick Saban and why Alabama struggled so much in the first quarter. But I mean, you have to teach these guys at a younger age that you are responsible for what you do, not only on the field, but off the field.
Absolutely. Now, Jeremy says he's glad to have Zeke for week 1. He wants a big win against the Giants. I'm 100% with you. My fantasy team is dancing in the streets because we get to have Zeke Elliott play against what might be one of the worst defensive fronts in football. It's going to be exciting to watch, both fantasy-wise as well as on the actual field. The only question I have is missing all that time. I know he was in Cabo supposedly working out and everything else, but it's hard working out when you're down somewhere like Cabo. In that tourist resort, you're not pushing yourself. I don't care who you are, as hard as you would be if you're hanging out at the team facilities. That might be an issue going forward for him. Jonathan, good to see you. Alex, you too, man. Glad to see you guys in here. Kenny says it's a good week for him so far. Both Penn State getting a big win and Zeke gets the big deal. I agree with you. If you're a Cowboy and Penn State fan, things are starting to roll for you.
Yep.
It's a little early on Cowboys. I want to see how they start the season. We still got Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper to lock up, but hey, it just starts with one. I like that Zeke is the first one off the board because I think he's still the most important guy there.
No, I agree 100%, and I think he's one of those guys that people, whether or not they admit it, other players look up to, and I think that, seeing that he got his deal maybe makes other guys still on the board a little bit more patient because I think Zeke was the most dramatic one, the most talked about, and so if you are still one of the guys on the board, I mean, it'd be interesting to be in the locker room and hear the conversations. Hey, I'm waiting for my time, or hey, I'm getting antsy. It would be interesting to see what those conversations are like. But Ezekiel Elliott, of course, getting a shot, and I'm very intrigued by how the Cowboys went about that. When you look at how long it took, the conversations that were had ended up being in their favor, but it satisfied one of the most hungry guys on the team.
Absolutely. Now, Steven's saying, going back to Antonio Brown here, saying that he's been sticking up for Antonio Brown all season. Yeah. Story checks out. He also says, not this time. The team did the right thing, and Mayock doesn't take crap, and he likes that. I understand the idea of you want to punish guys, and you want to set the precedent of when we tell you to be at practice, you be at practice. But again, Mike Mayock is going to have to be the same guy, convincing guys like Antonio Brown that the Raiders are a better landing spot than a lot of other teams in the NFL. They're already still somewhat talent deficient. That's a harder sell when you're putting you're stacking these kind of chips against you. Essentially, there are going to be teams out there like Tampa Bay that's saying, hey, we're not finding our players. They're just coming to practice,
I mean, I think this is what happens too when you have older guys who have more of a little bit of a push and shove than the younger ones, right? The young guys are hungry and humble. They're never going to miss because they don't want to get cut. But when you get older, I feel like you get a little bit maybe too comfortable in your position. And I think you're seeing general managers and coaches come in like, hey, y'all, like, I'm going to kick your rear end. This is not acceptable. you have to be part of this team. And I think guys like Antonio Brown, like I was saying, have this mentality about them that they're invincible, that nothing's going to happen to them. And it happens in circumstances where they look back, like, oh, my word, like, I could actually get cut off the team, right?
Right.
Because now you have the NFL. Now, of course, I was Mike Mayock, of course, general manager. But the NFL themselves are actually getting involved in some of these situations. And so I think we're going to start seeing guys over time realize, hey, it doesn't matter if you've been here 1 year or 15 years. You have to abide by the simple team rules we have. I mean, how hard is it to show up for a team walkthrough? How hard is it?
It's not.
It's not hard at all. In my opinion, if I was a coach, I'll be honest with you, I'd bench his rear end. I'd be like, you know what? You can sit game one because you're showing and honestly, if you're truly a team unit, and I'll give you an example, Johnny Manziel.
Go ahead.
What was the one reason that Texas A&M sucked as much as they did his last season? Because he took control of the team. Kevin Sumlin had no control. Johnny Manziel was in charge. You saw them fight physically on the sideline. You saw Johnny Manziel control the team, say whatever he wanted to, show up, didn't show up, and guess how much they won? They were horrible. Right? They could not do anything as a team unit. I think you're seeing guys like Antonio Brown do this to their team. It's starting to affect other guys. And I'm actually waiting for us to hear out of the locker room other people's comments. What's it like playing with him? What's it like having him on his team? Some people probably don't even like him.
I want to hear from Vontaze Burfict.
Like
That's who I want to hear from.
Him.
I mean, they've obviously had all the beef
Yep.
in the past from the Cincinnati-Pittsburgh
Yep.
rivalry. I think you're right. I think it can be very wearing, but I think they have a good quarterback in Derek Carr,
Yes.
a guy who kind of toes the
Yes.
line for the team, and he's very friendly. He's the
Yep.
guy. People made fun of him for crying when Amari Cooper got traded, but I think when you have a guy like that that's that team-oriented,
Yep.
that's that good at kind of
Yep. And Amari Cooper was a
making
big loss,
connections.
you know?
Absolutely. I think Derek Carr is a better guy to
Yeah.
have than maybe someone like Phillip Rivers, who's a little more
I agree.
a little more standoffish, or
Agreed.
maybe he's out there yelling at guys and everything. I think Derek Carr might be the key to rectifying the
Yeah.
situation. Have him sit down with Antonio Brown. Like,
Yep.
look, we have what looks like might be a halfway decent offense. The line
Yes.
is okay. We
Yep.
have Josh Jacobs, who's a first-round running back. We expect big things out
Ask
of
me
him.
how I know.
Yeah, I know. You've seen him firsthand. We also have Tyrell Williams coming in from the Chargers here. I almost called him San Diego. They're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Good wide receiver number 2. All we need you to do is be the number 1 piece, and this offense could be off to the races. That would be if I'm John Gruden, I'm going to go to Derek Carr, and I'm going to say, look, Derek, I need you to bail me out here on this one. Go talk to Antonio Brown and get him in there. As for why he's doing what he's doing, I think he's crazy. I think he's snapped. I think he's drinking the Kool-Aid on I am the shit. Hey, I didn't mean to say that. I am the best, and nobody can tell me any other way. So I think Antonio Brown is a little bit off the rails. He needs somebody that can come
needs a piece of humble pie.
have a heart
have
a heart time with him. Yeah.
I mean, this is seriously like being a diva. Like, this is absolutely like, I remember playing on teams with girls that act just like this. And I'm like, for example, when I was in high school, we literally had girls threaten not to play on our team because they didn't get the number they wanted. I said, guess what? I don't care. It does not matter if you're number 1 or number 14. Wear the jersey. Does not matter what number you like. If that's literally going to define, like, Antonio Brown's stupid helmet, if that's literally going to make him not play on a team, then he shouldn't be on that team. If the thought of, and it's a control issue. It's him wanting to be able to control. It's him wanting his way. And it's just like anything else. Like, how many times have I argued with my best friend or my family about where to eat? And after a point, I really don't even care. It's just the point that I want to get my way. That's how Antonio Brown's acting.
I'm not like that.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Antonio Brown is simply trying to get his way in every single situation, and I think I'm not the only one that would say I'm getting fed up of hearing about it.
Absolutely. Also, Alex says Antonio Brown is going to do Antonio Brown. You got to know what you bought when you made the deal. I'm with you there. You should know. But we never saw these type of antics. If anything,
No, he didn't.
Mike Tomlin did a good job of keeping Antonio Brown kind of on track for as long as he did. I mean, it spiraled out of control towards the end of it. But we saw a lot of good years with Antonio Brown there in Pittsburgh. Also, Scott had a good comment here. He said it sets a bad standard for discipline if anyone gets in trouble, letting people off the hook when it comes to the fines. I'm with you, Scott. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Yeah. If you let them off the hook, a lot of guys might decide that, I don't have to take them seriously. If you do fine them, a lot of guys might avoid your team because you're the team who fines people and won't have the players back when they have what they consider to be a legitimate grievance with the NFL with the helmet. Yeah. So, again, you really got to walk the line. I'm not saying that the Raiders had no choice, and I don't understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to go a little bit hard-nosed approach, like, hey, if you're here, you need to want to be here. It's just, again, I don't think it's a great precedent. I really don't. It's one of those things that when you start to do it and you start to show players that, hey, if you misbehave, even though it says in the contract that we'll fine you and you follow through with it, you can scare some free agents off. And that's not what Oakland needs at this point with the roster looking like this.
I agree 100%.
Couple more comments here. Corey's saying he's wondering if this huge signing of Zeke will have any effect on the Melvin Gordon situation. I think the Chargers have already been very clear saying that you're not going to get this money. You're not going to get Zeke Elliott money. You're not going to get anywhere near top running back money. That's why they gave him permission to seek a trade. I think it'll happen in the next couple of weeks. It'll probably be before week 3. Yeah. I think it's going to be Buffalo. I think it might be Indianapolis. It might also be Miami. The problem is there's a lot of teams that don't need a star-studded running back.
Exactly.
If you're either good like the Saints and you already have your guy, or you're good like Indianapolis, should be anyway, and you just say we're going to use a committee and we don't need to have a star. It's going to be really tough to find a team that's willing to trade multiple draft picks to get him, likely to be a second or a first-round pick. When you talk about Duke Johnson going for a third, you're probably going to have to give up a first. If not, then maybe you get by and give up a second or in like a fourth or something. Then they need to pay him. They need to give him the long-term deal for a running back who's been in the league and had injury history, and you're going to have to give him somewhere between $12 and $15 million a year. That's a hard sell. That is going to be one of the hardest situations, I think, for Melvin Gordon and his camp to find that right trade partner. If anything, I think it's Buffalo. They like running the ball. They're sort of good enough with that defense that maybe they're saying, hey, we've just spent on our receivers. If we bring in a star-level running back, we like running a lot. We just tried to rebuild this offensive line as well. Maybe this is the missing piece to get us to the playoffs or maybe challenge the Patriots a little bit. I just don't see it. I think Buffalo's going to stay conservative. They're going to say, we're going to play good defense, and we're going to go with Devin Singletary, who we just drafted. We're going to go with T.J. Yeldon, who we brought in. So I don't see it. I don't see the right answer. Maybe Miami, but you just work so hard to bring in all those picks. I don't see them shipping one of them off to get a running back that's had an injury history. So Melvin Gordon's in a tough spot. Melvin Gordon has to find the right situation. I know people are saying Tampa Bay. Tampa didn't have the money to sign Devin White. They are absolutely broke. They had to cut their best defensive player to sign their first-round draft pick. They don't have the money to give a running back $15 million a year. So
I agree. You're on it.
I don't see the right spot. Maybe Seattle. Maybe Seattle, who just traded for Jadeveon Clowney. If they're buying in, right?
If they're buying in,
And they're saying Chris Carson might not be the running back we hope him to be. Maybe they say we can do an upgrade and help out this rushing attack that we know can be one of the best in the NFL. We try to be the best rushing attack in the NFL every year. That maybe makes sense. But for a team that just traded away a third-round pick, they might not be too excited to trade away another pick to go get a running back.
I wouldn't think so.
So Gordon's in a tough spot. Let's hit a couple more of these comments, and then we'll move on. I want to talk Jared Goff before we talk college football.
Of course.
And then we'll grind into our college week here. Alex is saying Melvin's out for the year. There's a good chance of that. Or he just comes back and plays and says, I'll take the deal next time. Maybe the Chargers convince him to come back.
And that's a really interesting perspective because, I mean, it kind of gets us to a point where I have to ask the question, how badly do you really want to play? Because you have guys that come in the NFL, and why did they start playing as a kid? Was it really for the love of money, or was it for the love of the game?
I'm sure early on it's the love of the game.
And at some point, and I truly believe that you see the athletes that truly have the love for the game when they're willing to play for an amount of money that maybe they feel like they deserve more. Maybe they feel like, let's give Landon Collins an example. That was who we talked about my very first show. Of course, now becoming a defensive leader. A lot of people think he's overpaid, but a lot of people think he was underpaid his first time too. And so you look at the type of mentality guys have. Are they willing to maybe play for less than they think they're worthy of to have a shot to play? I'm not sure that if you truly love the game that the money's going to matter enough for you to be willing not to play a year. In my opinion. Now, some people...
Well, we've seen Le'Veon do it.
Yes, I know. But not everything worked out.
Absolutely.
There have been guys that definitely have been in opposite perspectives.
Now he has to play for the Jets.
Yes, I mean... Once you're out kind of now. Mm-hmm. Because you have so much talent coming out, and it's a different market than it used to be. Because you have guys that could get out and still be relevant in the NFL, come back, get another shot. But you have so much first talent coming out of college now that you see guys who have been in the league 3, 4, 5 years starting to get replaced with younger and younger and younger guys. So, I mean, yeah, you take the chance that maybe you'll take off a year, you don't get what you want, they're going to want you back. But more than likely, there's going to be someone else coming out of Division I NCAA college football that they're going to want more than you again. So
absolutely.
It's a chance that I don't know that if I was him, I'd be willing to take.
And this goes to Corey's point. Corey says the Chargers will be fine without Gordon. This is exactly the reason why he doesn't have the contract, because they have guys like Austin Eckler behind him that the Chargers are not super worried about. Yes, they'd love to have their star running back back, but they have guys that know can do damage from the running back position. They don't need to overbuy on a running back just because he's the only option there. They have receivers. They have Phillip Rivers, who's able to distribute really well. This is a team that, even though your Super Bowl window is open, kind of like Dallas, they're in a different spot because Phillip Rivers is going to be able to make use of anyone on the field that has a set of hands. You don't really have that same kind of aspect with Dak Prescott. We've seen him struggle to throw to anyone not named Amari Cooper or Jason Witten and Cole Beasley. He's managed to find some guys, but the Cowboys have always had that carousel of like talent in between that has not really worked out.
I mean, you look at a team that and the thing is this: if you're Melvin Gordon, I mean, you have to go to a team that still wants to run the ball, because you have so many different type of offenses now that, I mean, you're kind of limited. And I think that's why you have so many. You honestly have a flooded market of quarterbacks, because even then, it's like, what type of quarterback are you getting? Are you getting a guy like Kyler Murray that's able to be more versatile? Are you getting a Tom Brady type pocket passing quarterback who you know what you're getting? Like, let's be honest, Tom Brady's not going to go out for a 25, 30-yard dash and QB carry. That's not the type of quarterback he is. That's not the type of team the Patriots are. But you look at the teams now trying to find their niche. I mean, let's give you a good example. Seattle Seahawks. I mean, Russell Wilson's kind of evolved into a quarterback that went from, honestly, for first little bit being a pocket passing quarterback to running the ball more frequently. Seattle's changing its offense. Pete Carroll knows what he's doing. But I don't think that Seattle is looking at Gord saying that's who they need on their team right now. I really don't.
If they get him for the right price, I think they pull the trigger. So. But Seattle is a conservative franchise still. Even though they play aggressively, they're not going to go trade a first-round pick to go out and get a top-level player. So, what do you do? If you get him at the right price, you trade for him. If not, you roll with the committee. I mean, we see teams built similarly, like the Ravens, that say it doesn't matter who the running back is.
Trade as much as they've done this year. I don't.
I don't either. I don't see it happening. I see that as a potential landing spot, and if I could find a way to make it work, I think that'd be good for them. But I don't see Seattle selling out when the Rams are this good in division. You have the Saints who are going to be just as good.
They need higher picks.
Eagles and Bears. I don't see them really saying Melvin Gordon puts us over those teams. So I think the Seahawks still say we're gonna play it a little more conservative and bet on Russell Wilson instead of our running game. Also, going to Sharif's point here. Sharif said the Raiders knew what they were going to get to, talking about Antonio Brown. They should have, but I don't think anyone could have expected to be like this, right? From getting out of a hot air balloon and hurting his ankle to the cryogenic stuff off season, to him saying Big Ben was never my friend, he was a business acquaintance. And you watch Hard Knocks and his son's out there saying, where's Big Ben Roethlisberger? In the first episode, I mean, I don't think anyone could have known it would be like this. I'm sure they were saying we're going to have some headaches. There's going to be a little bit of an issue coming with Antonio Brown, and we just need to put him in the right culture and we can fix it. I don't think anyone expected him to be this far into his own head where it seems like the guy's unstable. It really does. He seems like he's almost mentally unstable to the point where you don't know what to expect from him week in and week out. Also, Sharif said the Chargers rejected the Eagles' offer for Melvin Gordon.
Some people call him evil.
Yeah, Cowboys fans especially. Saying they rejected Melvin Gordon for Jordan Howard and a pick swap. I would too, probably, if I'm sitting in L.A. these days. I did it again. Because Jordan Howard is a running back that, even though he has talent, and that seems to be undeniable, he's also a guy that fit into the right system and then was unwanted, very much like Jeremy Langford in Chicago. Remember, Jeremy Langford had that breakout year, and then the coaching paradigm kind of switched, and all of a sudden it's Jordan Howard's the best guy. Now the paradigm switches again, and Jordan Howard's the odd man out, and he was an attitude problem before he left.
I mean, that's hard being in that situation.
Absolutely. I don't think Jordan Howard's a viable running back if you're San Diego, or if you're L.A. The Chargers shouldn't be considering an attitude problem when you're built to win right now. Do not mess with the mojo of the team. You already have Austin Eckler. Go scoop somebody on a Carlos Hyde level that's probably out there for cheap that can do a little bit of power work, and you still have a good running back set, and you still have a good offense. So I don't think the Chargers necessarily would have made that trade.
We have tons of comments coming in.
Absolutely. Joseph says...
And I'm going to have to comment on one in a minute, talking about Tom Brady's rushing yards. I'll get to that in a second.
Just a sec. Let me talk about what Joseph's saying. He says he has a sleeper trade partner for us with Melvin Gordon. He says it's Detroit. They've been trying to get a running game going for years now. I think they're all in on Kerryon Johnson, though.
I mean, Kerryon Johnson's still young.
It'll only be a second year.
And I will say this. His older brother actually met a couple of months ago in the Huntsville airport. They're from, actually, Huntsville, Alabama. They played at Madison Academy. There's a little tidbit. And I was talking to him about, how he thought his brother did first year and, kind of the perspective. And he's like, listen, coach is trying to reformat that offense. They're trying to kind of reshape that offense to kind of be more of a running style game. And the coach said to Kerryon, you're just getting started. Like, you've not done anything for what we want you to do here. And so I think Kerryon is, and people talk about his game in college. The reason he got hurt, and let's just be honest, because Gus Malzahn's not always the smartest man. Why did you have Cameron Petway get hurt
Auburn
in the
shade
fourth
over
quarter, the last minute against Vanderbilt? He should never have been in. Kerryon Johnson gets hurt because they don't know how to utilize depth in the running back position. He's going to be strong, he's fast, and he's a good size for an NFL running back.
Right.
I truly believe that. So if I'm Detroit, yeah, maybe, but I don't think Melvin Gordon's going to be the type of guy that's going to be fine being settled for second or third string. He wants somewhere to play now.
Yep, absolutely. He's going to want the lion's share of the carries. And
Yep.
when you have a guy like Kerryon Johnson that you spent the high draft pick on, you're not going to go put Melvin Gordon into the game. I don't think it's a bad spot. You're right. They want to run the ball more. If they got him, I'm sure the Lions would love to have that kind of riches at running back. But when you have an offensive line built the way they do, where they're more pass blocking centric rather than run blocking centric, it's going to be tough whether you have Gordon or Kerryon Johnson. I say stick with the guy that you've got.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad spot. But I also don't, unless you got him for like the right price, I don't see the Lions pulling the trigger there either.
I don't either.
Now, Chris says his Trent Williams for Melvin Gordon straight up sounds good right now. That four-headed running back monster who needs receivers. Put Chris Thompson in the slot, run some creative offense, maybe run some wildcat or something. I don't know. Again, how many running backs do you need if you're Washington? They already have Adrian Peterson. They already have Darius Geis, who they spent a second-round pick on. They still have the running back whose name I can't think of. They just drafted 2 years ago. It's something weird. I was just talking about him earlier today. I can't think of it. And they have Chris Thompson. They have running backs for days in Washington. They don't really need to go trade for another one, especially when you need so much at receiver. I think you got to pump the brakes, right? You got to play a little bit of balanced football.
Now you're driving me crazy. Redskins running back. Who?
It starts with like an L or something like that. I can't think what his last name starts with an L. I can't think what it is. No, that's the Eagles.
Bryce Love.
That's and I was gonna say exactly. They have so many running backs in Washington.
All the running backs.
Samaje Perine. That's what I was looking for. Not an L, but Samaje Perine is who I was trying to talk about.
Not. Okay.
That's okay. Now, Scott's saying he's not faulting Melvin Gordon, but he's going after the money. He might land on a bad/losing team, yes. But if you're a running back, what do you do? Because the Chargers could just turn and burn you, get to the end of that rookie deal and say, yeah, well, let's go get someone else. Or we have Austin Eckler, and you're not worth the money. It's tough if you're a star-studded running back. You've got to get the money while you're healthy. You're one bad hit away from not being effective.
I mean, it's so
and everyone in the NFL
so
is.
true.
But if you're going to take more hits than anyone else, you might as well get paid early.
I was just watching, hashtag this is literally how my life is. Little testament of Hannah's life here. So at this point in the evening, and first in the morning, I'm like, I've got to go to bed by 9 o'clock. I'm exhausted, right? I get in bed. I stay up watching till 1 a.m. YouTube videos because, I'm not tired anymore once I get in bed. But last night I was watching a video they were talking about, like, the injuries, especially with the knee. And you look at a guy like Mackenzie Milton, who's looking to be, he's actually 100%. He's one of the 0.001% of people with his injuries actually regain full feeling in his feet. And he's one of the ones rarely that ever get his feeling back. He's looking to come back next year. But I was watching a bunch of videos regarding those injuries and some guys in the NFL and how it's literally just that tendon that messes with that artery in the leg, cuts it all circulation. If you have no circulation within 4 hours, you're basically done your career. But it's crazy to me that you truly are, like, and I don't think people realize that you're literally one hit away. Like, one hit away from your career being over.
And I think Mackenzie Milton's the perfect example of that. Talk about a guy on top of the world, and then all the rug is dragged out from under you.
Going to be a really high draft pick.
Absolutely. Cool. A couple more comments, and then we'll talk college football here. Sharif says Tom Brady just surpassed 1,000 yards rushing in his career.
I'm going to go ahead and say this. Yes, he averaged, 1 point?
When you played for 1,000 years.
Well, yes. In 2018, he made a fake or not fake, but he made an Instagram post saying he was not going to retire, so he got 1,000 yards. Let's just be honest. Do you know the numbers for his longest rush in his entire career?
Probably like 4. I'm going to bet
22 yards.
Okay, well, that's
was
pretty
the longest
good.
His average. You want to guess his average?
About 1.2.
1.7.
There you go.
Listen. What I was trying to prove is you're not seeing.
I think
Tom
that 22
Brady,
drags that average way up.
I know. That was probably a freak action where everyone played dead, right?
Yeah.
You're not seeing Tom Brady go out and he's not a Kyler Murray. That's what I'm trying to say. He's not a guy that's a versatile quarterback who's intentionally going to run the ball. When do we see Tom Brady run the ball?
The quarterback dive. When
Yes.
you need
When
0.8
you
yards on
desperately
3rd or
need
4th
that.
down.
And
Exactly.
even then,
because 80% of the time.
Even then.
I don't think so. He doesn't hesitate. 80% of the time, you hit that yard. And the Patriots know that. This is why they're a good team. They play the numbers.
He hesitates. It's a weird thing. I'll pull up a clip. There's a moment once he gets a snap that he looks up and before he runs.
Am I going to die?
And
No?
It's like if
And
you
then he
just not
falls
look
over.
up and just go, you would get 2 or 3 yards. But then you get that one. I
But
mean, not
you
that
don't
matters.
need 2 or 3.
I know,
exactly.
but not that matters.
It's
but,
all about minimizing the damage to your 42-year-old
body. It's not like he's intentionally
body.
running for 1,000 yards. It's not like he's rushing 1,000 yards every single
They run
year.
Tom Brady a lot, though. And he winds up in the bottom of a lot of piles because the Patriots aren't afraid to go and dive on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 when they need the first down.
it works for him, but,
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on. Some great comments here in the comments. Also, as Chris says, is that a sports around the bar koozie? His hands are getting cold, the beers are getting warm. We're going to have them in the future. It's been a battle to get any kind of merchandise whatsoever because everybody I talk to says, we'll do it, it'll be great, and then just ghosts me. Just like my love life. What? Anyway, we'll move forward. We're going to talk about college football. I'm going to reload, Hannah, because I need another beer. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. So I'm going to let you carry here. I want to talk about what you see as the best game from last week.
From week 1. Okay, from week 1, college football. I'm going to let some comments roll in because I like to see what other people have to say. I mean, there were quite a few. If we're talking best game as in most interesting to watch, I think everyone's going to agree that Oregon-Auburn was that game. Comes down to, honestly, a Bo Nix miracle, we'll call it.
I saw it all along.
Yes.
I predicted it all along.
If you're an Auburn fan, sorry, not really the game how you want to see that go out. I mean,
it's a big win.
Big win, but not a big victory.
I'm going to say big victory, big win. As long as you win it, everyone's going to say you beat a top 12 team week 1 when you're not rolling.
You beat an Oregon team week 1. I would love to see Auburn play this type of game week 8. Because the thing's this. They came out inconsistent. And what really shocked me was, honestly, the way the defense played. Yes, we know Oregon had a great offense. We never doubted that. I thought defensively Auburn was going to do a lot better in that game than they did. I thought Auburn was going to have a lot of crazy interceptions or make them fumble or a lot of blitzes. Oregon read their defense pretty well. I was pretty impressed with what Oregon did offensively. They stunk it up.
It's all about the last
halftime.
9 seconds.
Well, yes, but they stunk it up second half. Came out not the same team they came out with the first half. I think that's why you saw an Auburn team who Bo Nix, you look at the stats for that game, not impressive at all. But threw the ball the right plays, honestly, and I'll say this to the day I die. It was not a great throw. It was a great catch. Because if it was not for the wide receiver getting the ball, wrapping it around the defender, that we wouldn't even be talking about that game.
Takes 2 to tango.
Yes,
the ball was right where it needed to be. And I'll say this, who also picked Auburn to win last week? That would be your boy right here. Even though I'm not going to lie, I was sweating it out.
Did I not pick Auburn to win?
I think...
I don't think I actually picked a team.
I don't remember.
Because he picked...
It's hard enough for me to keep track of what I say.
I know I didn't pick one because I kind of gave it both what would both teams have to do to win. But, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Chris is also saying that Boise and Florida State was a great game.
Yes, it was.
Florida State
taking
off its heels, man. Boise, I don't know that they're for real, but I think this is a good, impressive first win.
Yeah.
I think Florida State is missing Jimbo Fisher probably worse than any team is missing a coach. I'm going to say since James Franklin and Vanderbilt. I think that's probably the worst kneecapping I've seen a team go through without their head coach.
I mean, it was a good game.
Maybe Lane Kiffin in Tennessee.
You look at Bachmeier, what he did, 38-51, 470 yards, but 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Not the best game statistically for them, but they did well. I mean, honestly, you look at James Blackman, the quarterback now for Florida State, 23 of 33, 337 yards, 327, and 3 touchdowns. Statistically, it looks good for Florida State in the ACC if they can keep up this type of game. But to open up against Boise State, that was going to be a big statement for FSU. I mean, after the last couple of years, their opening games, they needed to win, didn't come out with this. The Boise State, the thing is this. Boise State football is the equivalent of Gonzaga basketball. They're always that team that's like a Cinderella story, and then it all crashes and burns. So, good win for Boise State week 1. I want to see what they're able to do later on in the season.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think this is a good way to start, but I think it just shows you how weak Florida State actually is right now. I think they're absolutely terrible. I don't know that Florida State's a team... Who knows? We've seen the Vols absolutely fall apart. We've seen some top programs in the past fall apart by losing the coach. I don't know they've done a good enough job replacing Jimbo Fisher. I think it's one of those things that going forward, Florida State is going to struggle until they find a way to recruit at a high level and then play those recruits at a high level.
And Willie Taggart's still trying to rebuild a team that, honestly, Jimbo Fisher one and done. I mean, you look at Jameis Winston, and you look at...
They have Francois, and he's the guy, right? And he gets hurt, and then he comes back, and he's not as good.
Blame that on Alabama. Blame that on that. Same as Colt McCoy against Texas in 2009 to win the national championship, whatever. But... what I'm saying is, you're still trying to... I still think Florida State's honestly, truly... I mean, the joke is about Tennessee and rebuilding, but I think truly Florida State is actually still in a rebuilding program.
Right.
Because it's not only who they have, it's honestly getting recruits. They've been struggling the last couple of years to actually get really good recruiting class because you're competing now with Florida. You're competing with a lot of other programs in that area, even Miami. And that program, that excitement. I mean, you have Asa Martin. Of course, you had Tate Martell looking to be a wide receiver now at Miami. But there's just a lot going on behind the scenes that I think Florida State's going to have to recoup from.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about a few of these games that from last week that kind of surprised us a little bit. The Vanderbilt and Georgia one, I'll admit I was wrong. I thought Vandy was going to cover that 20-point spread because their defense is good. Georgia had no problem. They took an early lead. We were talking about it before the show, how Jake Fromm didn't look impressive in that game, but I think when you're playing against a defense like that, 30 points is good enough, and they absolutely coasted afterward. They're like, that's it. We know Vandy's not going to score. We'll just coast. I was wrong in there. Yeah. I had a pretty good week otherwise, though. I think I did decent.
I mean, you look at Jake Fromm. I mean, I said before the show that I think we're going to see more of in a game manager role. I mean, they've lost a lot of talent. And honestly, the depth in the quarterback position is something to circle to there. If you're Kirby Smart, to look cautious, I'd be wrapping Jake Fromm up in bubble wrap every single game. Look at the two guys who left. Jacob Eason now in Washington. We'll be talking about that game in a minute. And, of course, obviously Justin Fields now at Ohio State. Both had great week ones for their universities. But if I'm Georgia, honestly, the way the East played, and we talked about this before the show too, the way the East played last week, kind of coasting there between maybe Florida being a threat later on in the year, but the East is still the least.
Right.
And Tennessee, I mean, come on now, seriously, they're gonna let that happen.
Did that game surprise you? Tennessee losing to Georgia State? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I mean, I thought they would win. I said they'd win by 7. I didn't think they'd lose by 7.
Wow. That, to me, again, this was a huge kind of disappointing game. We saw Tennessee's offensive and defensive line get manhandled by a team that shouldn't even be in the same conversation.
Nope.
Georgia State just took $1 million to absolutely embarrass Tennessee on national television.
It's like Alabama and University of Louisiana Monroe a long time ago.
Yes, okay.
Before
but
Alabama was
this is probably the worst loss in Tennessee history, and then to get blown up on both sides of the ball like that, I just wonder how they're going to compete in the SEC when you've got to go play the Georgias, you got to go play the Floridas that have these great defenses that are going to go after your quarterback. It's going to get ugly unless something changes this week against BYU. Also, a couple games I want to talk about from last week, Utah versus BYU. I was kind of right. I was kind of wrong. I was like, I think BYU can keep this one close. Even though it finished 30-12, it was 9-6 at halftime. I was like, I'm right on the money. BYU fell apart in the second half. I think a tough out. They might even have a chance of beating Tennessee this week. Utah looks like they might be a legitimate threat for the Pac-12.
They're going to have to do something on offense, though.
Absolutely.
I mean, only throwing for 108 yards, Tyler Huntley. I mean, that's not acceptable.
BYU is a little bit better of a defense than some of these other defenses are going to play this year. But exactly, 108 yards usually doesn't get it done in college football.
There's a rain delay and all, weather delay and all these things. But still,
especially when you get sacked in college football, it counts as rushing yards, not passing yards. So 108, not good enough.
Yep, not good enough. Let's see some other games here I was impressed with. Of course, Ohio State, Florida Atlantic, Justin Fields, like I said, first game, Justin Fields, of course, going 18-25, 234 yards and 4 touchdowns. Defensively, I'm going to circle Ohio State because when you let Florida Atlantic, I mean, they came out hot. I mean, it was 28-3 going into halftime. 28-3. Then you let them score 18 points, 15 of which in the fourth quarter there for Florida Atlantic. If I am Ohio State, I'm circling my defense in the third and fourth quarter. Like, what are we going to have to do to prevent this? Because if you're letting a little team, whether or not they were tired, whether or not whatever the excuse was, you don't let a team score 15 points in the fourth quarter. If you're letting a Florida Atlantic team do that, when you get to bigger games like Michigan, Iowa, I mean, that's going to be a big issue. So I'm a little concerned defensively for Ohio State, but I think offensively they did well.
Yep, and I'm going to say throw it out. Florida Atlantic is not a true test. I think Ryan Day faces his true test this week when they play Cincinnati. We'll talk about that in just a second.
Yep.
As for last week, I will say another great call, and I did miss this one, UNC versus South Carolina. Big game. You had that one right on the nose. I thought
it.
South Carolina would come out stronger, but
I said Mac Brown was going to come out hot.
We don't always get what we want.
No, we don't.
Absolutely. But I did call Northwestern versus Stanford. I said Stanford would be fine in that. I also said Notre Dame was going to be fine against Louisville. That turned out to be true. I think a lot of these programs are starting to live up to some of the hype, like Notre Dame and also Stanford. To me, when you look at the Pac-12, Oregon losing this first game, it's not as big of a deal. But Stanford beating a team like Northwestern now has the reins in the Pac-12. A big win against Oregon, if they play each other this year, will pretty much secure the Pac-12 for them. I really don't see a lot of other competition. Maybe Utah. Maybe we see someone else kind of rise up. But teams like USC, who I'm going to talk about when they play Stanford this week, they're almost an afterthought, and it's a shame when
that's a very close matchup.
Exactly.
I mean, that's probably going to be one of the biggest unknowns, I think, going into week 2 is Stanford USC, because you have so many spreads. Right now they're even. Right now it's a flat 0 because there's just so many inconsistencies there with USC Stanford. Very quickly, I'll go over Alabama. A lot of people were questioning first quarter Alabama why they look so flat. It's because Nick Saban's actually putting down some discipline. You have several guys, including 3 of their starting running backs, who were placed on a quarter suspension because of off-the-field antics, missing some events, kind of like Antonio Brown. And he's like, listen, I'm going to bench you for the first quarter. So you saw some very young talent come on the field, run the ball. Alabama struggled first quarter, end up winning that game. Tua Tagovailoa, though, very consistent, 26 of 31, 336 yards, 4 touchdowns. Alabama played the defensive game they wanted to, outstanding. And then probably the biggest game that you and I talked about before the show, of course, Oklahoma. Oklahoma, Houston. I'll go ahead and say this. I think there were probably more people outside of Oklahoma. I think the biggest state to have attendees watching this game was definitely Alabama. Because I think you have a lot of Alabama fans, like myself, who love Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is a class act. He's an outstanding person. And to see him do this game, throwing 20 of 23, 332 yards, 6 total touchdowns, 3 rushing, set school records for first-time game, and also the first quarterback to be able to rush and throw for that many yards in one game. What I'm impressed with, though, and I'll say this, I think this is what happens when you put the right guy at the right school. I think Jalen Hurts lost his mojo and lost his confidence at Alabama. I think the way they played Alabama was a completely different way than he played at Oklahoma. I think he needed a fresh start. I think you see a guy like Lincoln Riley, who's honestly a quarterback whisperer, a little bit like Dan Mullen, but even more so. You look what he's done in the last 2 years with Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts. I'm going to go and say he will be in New York at the Heisman ceremony. If he wins it, I don't know yet. It's too early to tell, but I think he'll definitely be there. And I think this, yes, they let 31 points go by to Oklahoma. And I said this before the show. What's the reason Oklahoma's not won a national championship in a while? Because they're struggling on defense. I mean, when you have a team like, and I said this, if Baker Mayfield would have had a defense that was actually superb, they would have won a national championship that year. Truly would have. Because you look at...
There's a lot of years you can point to that. Say they have the offense, play a little bit of defense, you're in
their
there.
Defense struggling. It should have been a 49-14 game. There were 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. Honestly, I would have been like, you know what? That was completely... If it was in baseball, it would have been an error. That's how sad it was. So in my opinion, I'm excited for the offense of Oklahoma. Defense, they've still got a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on. We'll talk about this week's games. Also, Chris wants to know, does Clemson take this one easily? Obviously, this might be game of the week when you have number 1 matching up against number 12 in week 2 of college football. It's going to be interesting to see. As for whether they take it easily, no. I'm not going to say it's easy. I think with Jimbo Fisher coaching this Texas A&M team, they're going to score points. I think Clemson's defense is going to be tested in a way has not been tested since last year. Losing all 4 of those defensive guys in the front, all 4 of those big defensive linemen. We're going to see how well Clemson recovers here with that next generation of talent here. Yep. I think this is going to be close. I think Texas A&M is going to hang with them for a while, but defensively, Texas A&M probably can't hold up with Clemson. I think this is like a third quarter, maybe 5 minutes left to go. You're going to see Clemson pull ahead and then eventually take the lead in this game. Early on, though, watch for Texas A&M to come out and try to shock a team like Clemson, try to get them back on the back heels. And maybe steal a win here. I think this is the game to watch. Even though we have LSU versus Texas as well this week, I think when you're watching Clemson play with what they've lost and what A&M can do on the field offensively, this is the game that I think might turn college football, on a dime here. If Clemson drops this one, all of a sudden things get a lot more interesting in all the polls.
Yep, I agree 100%. And I mean, you look at the 19.5-point favorite that they are right now. It's going to be a big game. Now, Texas A&M is still in a I would say slump, maybe not completely slump, but Jimbo Fisher's trying to restore a program to its capacity. Kevin Sumlin kind of ran at the ground. I have probably in my entire life not seen a coach want to leave his job as much as Kevin Sumlin wanted to leave.
Right.
Texas A&M. I mean, he was miserable. The athletes were miserable. Everyone was miserable. They just wanted to part ways. But I'm excited to see what's going to happen now. This Texas A&M team's a lot different than I think, and I think they may be coming into the season underrated, which is actually good for them because it gives them a little bit of hype, it gives them a little bit of excitement to live up to expectations that honestly people don't have right now for them. So yes, I agree. Clemson, Texas A&M, that's probably going to be one of the favorite games to watch. A lot of people don't really, know some of these games going on. Wake Forest and Rice, I always just like this matchup. I think it's always just a fun game to watch. I love historical games. Wake Forest and Rice is one of them. UAB and Akron. I really have been watching UAB.
With the new program coming back.
Yes, with the new program coming back. Of course, conference champions. They've done a fantastic job winning a bowl game. And I'll say this. UAB is just an amazing story. If you don't even know about it, Google it. Watch some videos. It's outstanding what's happened. Vanderbilt, Purdue. We talked about this one. What do you think is going to happen here? I think this is going to be a big matchup for Vanderbilt, and they're going to have to come up on top.
They're going to have to win this one.
Yes.
I mean, after week one, Georgia's a tough matchup to start with. Yep. But bringing in a team like Purdue that's not a slouch, especially for a program that's kind of on the fringes. They play really good defense. Offensively, they have never really found it under head coach Derek Mason. I think Vanderbilt needs to come out and make a statement win against a mid-range team like Purdue. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of recruits leave you.
Yep.
This is the game that you can sell to recruits saying, look, we've got the defense.
I mean, we
know how to run that.
But, that's still not.
These days, that doesn't count for much. I was going to say, Georgia State beat Tennessee now. You need to have that kind of staple win.
Yep.
This is where Vandy turns on a dime here. If they lose to Purdue, we could see the program take a dive and maybe Derek Mason moves on.
Yeah. Looking at some of the smaller schools, I mean, Alabama, New Mexico State, not really a big matchup there. But it is a game where I think you have a lot of big teams. You're going to see some younger guys come out. We kind of saw that last week with Alabama, but I'm still excited to see what's going to happen, even with the depth. I mean, you look at the depth at Auburn, that's a question we're going to see depth offensively, and then depth offensively for Alabama. We saw a little bit last week, but even more so this week, I think, even in the wide receiver position. But I'll go ahead and say another game that's going to be good. A lot of people don't even know about Boise State Marshall.
Boise State has something to prove. Coming off that big win here, Boise State needs to continue, keep the momentum rolling because, again, a win against a team like Marshall, and then you go into more interesting games as the year goes on. You have a chance to creep up in those top 25 rankings because you have such an impressive win from week one where they beat Florida State. I think Boise is a team that I'm not going to call them a dark horse, but this is the year where maybe you finish like 15th if you have a good year or 20th. Yep. And for Boise, I think that's great. You can get some recruits if you finish that high.
Cincinnati, Ohio State. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give a little bit of historical context why I'm saying this. You look at Cincinnati, Ohio State interim coach Luke Fickell, of course, taking over that program. They went 4-8 in 2018. Last year went 11-2, finished top 25 in the polls. I think this can be a big game. Not saying they're going to beat Ohio State, but I think they could actually be a really good testament this week for them rather than last week with FAU.
Absolutely. Also, big game this week. Obviously, LSU at Texas. Number 6 versus number 9 is always a big one. When it's week 2.
College game day.
Exactly. When it's week 2, it's always an interesting matchup. Who are you going with in this one?
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. It's so hard because you never know. Honestly, in the SEC, there are just a few programs where you don't know what type of team you're going to get. I think with LSU, this is it. It's really going to be, can LSU's defense stop Sam Ehlinger? I mean, it's going to be what Sam's going to be able to do, what the LSU defense is going to be able to do, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. Yeah, you look at LSU offensively, what they did last year. Still a good program this year, but I think we're going to be talking about more about the LSU defense this year than we have in previous years, and I think that's an intentionality thing they had. They were a team for a while in the SEC, did really well on offense, struggled on defense. I think this year it's going to be opposite. Maybe we'll see a defensive type squad, but I don't know. I mean, they played. This is like their second time ever playing.
Well, I'll lead
Third
then.
time.
I'll lead. That's okay.
No,
LSU is going to win this one. And let me tell you why.
I'm just trying to think of a point spread. It's always been a close game.
An incredibly talented defense that's going to be able to make a bunch of moves against an offensive line that's going to have some questions in Texas. Not to mention a team like Texas and Longhorn fans that want to believe their team is back. They played a lot of close games. Now all of a sudden you're playing against top-tier talent, top-tier defense like LSU has. Not to mention, they found their passing attack if week 1 is to be believed. I think LSU wins this one more comfortably than people think. I'm going to take LSU, and I'm going to give them 9 points here. I think LSU wins this one with more space than people think, even though they're coming into this one as a dog.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going with LSU. I'm just trying to think of, 21-17.
21-17.
21-17 LSU over Texas. That's why I was hesitating. I was trying to think of a good point matchup. We'll go with that.
I think it's going to be like 26-17. I really think this is going to be a wider margin than a lot of people think. I'm still taking Clemson from our major matchup. Ohio State. They're going to win. We both know Ohio State's going to beat Cincinnati.
How much?
The question is, what do they look like against their first legitimate contender? And no, Cincinnati's not going to be in the running to beat them, although Ohio State loses one of these games every year.
I would not say that they're not. I mean, I think Cincinnati could actually beat Ohio State. I'm not just saying that. I mean, yeah, they did well offensively, but defensively, they were not the sharpest team. Haven't really ever been. So Cincinnati does honestly have a chance to win this game. Are they going to? Probably not. But much more of a chance than FAU did last week.
Right. And going back to Brandon's point, he says LSU's defense is scary. You're 100% right, Brandon. It's one of those things that LSU, I think the defense is going to maul a Florida offense that's not ready for it, especially with an inexperienced offensive line that now has one game together playing. I think this is all LSU. I think they're going to kind of embarrass Texas a little bit. We're going to see Texas take a big step back in the rankings, and we're also going to see LSU as a legitimate contender. Do they get there in the SEC West? No, because it's difficult. But I think they get close.
I think LSU.
How you doing, Nathan?
I call this. I think LSU is actually going to be the team to watch in the West. I do, because you look at when they're playing. Let me just pull up their schedule, because I don't have all these memorized. But LSU, if you look at placement and teams, they actually have a very variable schedule. Okay, look. Playing Texas this week, next week at home against I guess that's Northwestern State Demons, right? They're going on the road to Vanderbilt, at home against Utah State, at home against Florida, traveling to Mississippi State, hosting Auburn, okay? Go to Alabama, go to Ole Miss, host Arkansas, host Texas A&M. So you look at the games that they're playing at home, 75-80% of their ranked matchups are going to be at home, right? You can't beat that. Yes, they have Alabama on the road. Yes, they have Ole Miss on the road. I mean, honestly, out of all of their road games, they lose one. That's Alabama. You're looking at a team, if LSU, I think LSU has a good chance to beat Auburn. I'm going to go and say that. I think LSU beats Auburn this year. You're looking at Alabama and LSU simply competing for West. I think LSU is going to be the one team that has a chance to beat Alabama in the West to get that West title. I really do. I think because it's really
I'm going to say the West is now stacked. Auburn winning against Oregon. Yeah. Look, if they lose and then you lose to Alabama, all of a sudden you have 2 losses and you're not really going to be in the running. Beating a team like Oregon in week 1, and then you go and play Alabama. Even if you lose that game, if Alabama loses one to anyone in the field, you have an argument saying, look, we beat a top 10 team in week 1. We're a good squad. Even if they beat us head-to-head, we have a legitimate argument to make the national championship. Auburn, I think, is in it. I still think Texas A&M is in it, even though I don't love their defense. Everyone is going to dismiss losing to Clemson. Unless you get blown out of the water, everyone's going to dismiss losing to Clemson. I think A&M is still in the race. I still think you have LSU. I still think you have Alabama. I think the West is wide open. There's
West
one
is
good
best,
conference.
East is least. That's
exactly.
All I say.
You have one good conference in the SEC, and every one of those teams have a legitimate chance of winning it, even though Alabama's favored. It never gets any easier for them because the West is always the toughest one to play.
And the thing is this, I mean, and the reason I pick LSU, not that.
And Nathan, that conference is loaded in the West. The East is looking terrible this year. If you look at Ole Miss losing to Memphis, Tennessee losing to Georgia State,
I'm like, come on. And then the barely squeak ways like Ole Miss, whatever. What I'm saying is I'm not picking LSU necessarily to beat Alabama right now. I'm saying they're easily my second favorite team in the SEC. I think it's really the first year we're seeing them be a dynamic team on defense and offense. And, it's going to be interesting what happens with this team. But I'm just going to go ahead and say this. Ed Orgeron, we're talking about a guy who was on the hot seat. And I'll talk about this next week. I want to talk about some guys coming out of week 2. We'll cover this next Wednesday. Week 3, coaching the hot seat. Because we're going to have a few coaches after this week be on the hot seat. But Ed Orgeron, a guy who honestly went from being on the hot seat to being in the front seat, taking over the squad, has done a fantastic job, not only on the field but with the recruiting. They had a really good year recruiting as well. So LSU's loaded. LSU's really excited. They're on fire, and I don't think they're going to have a sloppy season people think they are.
And Nathan's right. The SEC is absolutely loaded. The West is one of those conferences to look out. They have 4 or 5 teams that could legitimately compete for a national championship. As for the East, they have Florida and Georgia right now that still look good.
And
even if they started slow, they look good.
I'm like, don't look 100%. Yeah, I mean, what do you say? You're saying Alabama has no room for mistakes, but as loaded as their division is? No, I don't. I think Alabama has no room for mistakes. I think this is the year.
That's precisely my point. There is no space in the SEC.
No, there's not.
Auburn
they
beat
can't lose
Oregon.
a game. If Alabama loses their regular season game and still wins the SEC championship, maybe they get in. But I think you have a position, I honestly do, that is going to be a kerfuffle like last year. All right, even the year before, and I think Alabama's going to have to go undefeated this year. I really do.
And let me tell you, this is why we need 8 teams in the college football playoff. Because Brandon, to your point here, there are probably 5 SEC teams that could legitimately make the playoff and have an argument to say we're the best team in the nation. You've got teams like Penn State that deserve to be in there, and Ohio State that has been all over the place. Michigan is an outside contender. You have Oklahoma and Clemson. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot of them. If you look at it, there's probably 6 of the best 10 college football programs hanging out in the SEC, and 4 or 5 of them are in the West. So Alabama has to absolutely watch how it treads, because you're only going to get maybe 2 of your teams from the SEC into the college football playoff. If anything, college football is there to make money. You're going to want to involve the rest of the country. It doesn't matter who the best team is. It matters who's going to make the playoff. Right now, there is so little room for error in the SEC West, which is why or in the SEC in general, I think that's why it's important that Auburn beat Oregon in week 1, because now, even if you lose to Alabama and that's your only loss, you have the argument of, hey, it was just a bad day for us. That was our bad day. So, again, the SEC is going to be interesting to watch. 2 more games that I want you to pay attention to this week. Stanford at USC. Stanford's creeped up to number 23 after their big win in week 1. USC, historic program that's definitely on its way, I want to say down. We want to see them bounce back, but they have been in a backslide for years.
I mean, it's been,
That's the reason this is the game to watch is with Oregon losing in week 1. Stanford's now in the driver's seat to win the Pac-12 and potentially sneak their way into
USC has not had their dynasty since Pete Carroll.
Precisely.
I mean, it's been probably one of the most heartaching things to watch. And, I mean, USC...
I don't lose any sleep over it.
No, I know, but it is sad. But USC, I mean, I will say this. Opening up against Alabama, losing, then coming back, having a historical year, still a great job for USC, but we haven't really seen the consistency that they need. If there's a way, now I'll go ahead and say this. If USC somehow wins this game against Stanford, I think they have a chance to win the Pac-12.
Absolutely.
Because this is really going to be their biggest test of the season. Yeah, you play UW, you play Washington State, but this is always a mental game. And Stanford's always that team. I mean, Stanford's knocked Oregon off its knocker a few times. I mean, let's see that. I mean, what was that? Was that have been 2012 that Baylor had to lose? Texas.
Yes,
yeah, there's a
bunch
of crazy things that have to happen. And
it
was Stanford had to beat Oregon, and they did. So that's going to be a big matchup to watch. I'm excited. I mean, honestly, it's going to be probably one of the closest games we see. I mean, I think it may come down to a final drive.
Finally, UNC, North Carolina, with Mac Brown at head coach, is going to match up against Miami. The U is going to be looking to bounce back after their loss to Florida in week 0. Look for them to be more polished. I think now, 2 weeks removed from that loss to Florida, they should be better. They need to win this game, and hopefully we have a challenger in the ACC against Clemson. But, I mean, Florida State losing week 1, Miami losing week 1. It looks like it's Clemson's division still far and away. I think that's going to be an important game. One of these teams, regardless of who wins, is going to be looking really, really good going into the rest of the season. I think this is a win-win situation because one team looks good, the other team, you can kind of forgive it. It's going to be a tough game for them. Finally, Brandon says
I will say one more when you're done.
Go ahead.
Oregon State, Hawaii.
You're all in on Hawaii.
I am because I said Hawaii Arizona is going to be a very interesting matchup, and I said if Hawaii can win this game, they're going to be on the radar. I think they are. If there's a way they beat Oregon State and get some of these wins in a row, they're going to start being a threat. And I'm not saying they're going to win a conference championship, but they're definitely going to be a threat. So I'd be excited to see that.
Look out for Hawaii.
Yeah.
I'm not on the train yet. I'm not on the train yet, but you never know.
10, right? Aloha.
Exactly.
I would love to see them get 10 wins. Not that it's going to happen. I mean, they don't really have the most favorable schedule, but
they're a fun team to root for.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And the thing is this. I mean, they have an easy schedule. I mean, Oregon State, then they travel to Washington. That's going to be a loss. Okay, they play Central Arkansas. They play Nevada. Play Boise State. I think they can beat Boise State. Play Air Force, New Mexico, Fresno State. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, they have a very favorable schedule. So we may be talking about them later on, being a possible contender to actually have a good bowl game this year.
Absolutely. All right, before we get out of here, Nathan says the ACC, what a joke. Mm-hmm. But you can kind of say that about every conference not named the SEC. There's very little parity in college football. You have Ohio State that's run away with the Big Ten. I know it. I know everyone's saying Michigan and Sparty and Penn State now that they got James Franklin. But this has been a conference that up until recently has not had a whole lot of competition. The Big 12 usually is one team or two teams. Sometimes we see Baylor good. Sometimes TCU's been good. More often than not, it's Oklahoma. Or Texas, way back in the day, if you want to go throw back to when Mac Brown was the head coach there. The Pac-12 has not been the same for years now. Right now, you got the SEC with a lot of parity, and you have every other conference that has one or two big dogs, and it's just the question of which one of them actually makes it out of the fight there. Again, college football is set up to help the winners. It's still an interesting watch. We still want to see what happens with a lot of these teams, but you can't tell me that any team besides the SEC, you're going to pick an underdog to actually win the conference, even though Alabama has dominated that conference for years.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, the thing is this, too. I mean, and this is my point we talked about last week, of course, with, Alabama possibly seeing two SEC teams in there. That's one reason why I didn't circle Georgia, because I kind of knew they'd have some inconsistencies. Not saying right now week 1 against Vanderbilt's going to push them out of the chance to be in there, but I think you see the fact that, like I said, Alabama's the reason the BCC no longer exists. I think you're seeing a committee, you're seeing people who are kind of thinking Alabama's like Golden State, always in the championship game, always in the finals. Do we see in Alabama 1 or 2 loss Alabama in? No, I don't think so.
I think you might. I think it's a benefit of the doubt. And there are a lot of Crimson Tide fans.
The only way that's going to happen is if Alabama was to lose earlier than against Auburn. Because if Auburn wins out... No, I don't.
I do. Unless you have an undefeated. I think they get in with 2.
It's going to be different than last year because Georgia is not going to come... I mean, the thing is this. If Auburn was to beat Alabama at Auburn, beat Georgia in the SEC Championship, I don't think you would see an Alabama be in there because the last time you saw that, Georgia beat Auburn in the SEC Championship after Auburn had beaten Georgia and Alabama. That was a kerfuffle. We had a lot of people outraged about that. I'm just saying, personally, I think if we see 2 SEC teams, it's going to be because Alabama lost in October, not November.
It could happen, but I think Alabama has the benefit of the doubt at this point. I think, Nathan's all in with you. But I think Alabama could lose 2, and then you have another 1-win team.
Lose 2?
Yeah, and sneak in as the 4th seed in the college football playoff. You know why? Because they want to see them match up against Clemson again because it gets all the ratings.
No one does.
And it has the history. I think everyone does.
I don't even want to know. You know who I
want to see. You'd love to see Clemson not in there.
No.
Well, you want to see Alabama.
I want to see Alabama and Oklahoma face on the national championship. But you know what? I'll go and tell you this. If Jalen Hurts was to win a Heisman... I'd want to see defense
like that in the national championship, too.
Listen, if Jalen Hurts was to win a Heisman and beat Alabama, his former team national championship, I tell you what, that boy's going to have an ESPN 30 for 30 the next year. I promise you.
He should.
What a crazy
what I want to see? 8 teams in the college football playoff, so we don't have to play guessing games.
What? Technically,
because right now, I don't want to say...
week 1's the start of a playoff, if you look at it right.
Right, but I still don't want to say, what if Georgia would have made it? What if Florida would have made it? What if Penn State would have been in there? What if Notre Dame had been in there this year?
I want to know what Frank's saying no chance about. He's going to have to clarify. What are you talking about, Frank, no chance?
I think Alabama 2 losses. He's probably with you on this one, but I think Frank's going to be with you on a lot of these things.
Well, no, it's the fact that...
Look,
I mean, I know people on the committee.
If you have an undefeated in the SEC and Alabama has 2 losses, they're out. But if Alabama has 2 losses... The team that has dominated this conference,
if Alabama has 2 losses, they lost to Auburn and LSU.
Well, I'm saying if
those teams would go in above
or
them.
it's a surprise one, whatever. If Alabama has 2 losses and you have a 1-loss team in the West, it doesn't matter. Alabama's going to be your 4th seed in the SEC because everyone's going to want to see the rematch. They may pit them against the best SEC team. If it's Georgia that wins the SEC championship or Alabama loses the SEC championship and LSU sneaks in. That will be the first game, they'll do it because they don't want to be the national championship.
The only way I can see this happen, and this is really pushing it, is if Auburn was to lose to LSU, Alabama beats LSU, loses to Auburn goes to the SEC championship game, beats Georgia, they get in. So we're looking at an Alabama team who had 1 loss, but beat the team who's in the SEC championship, but because of their loss, I mean... I don't think it's going to happen. I don't, because I think Alabama's going to get in because Alabama's going to win. We're not going to even see a 2-loss Alabama team. I honestly don't think we're going to see a lost Alabama team. I think Alabama's going to be undefeated this year, go to the SEC championship game, win the SEC championship.
They have
the two teams you look at to beat them are going to be LSU and Auburn. Those are the two games you look at. If Alabama was to lose either one of those games, it's going to have to be LSU. It cannot be Auburn. They would not be able to go to the SEC championship after lose. Go in the playoff after losing.
I think they've built enough equity. It doesn't matter. 2 losses, as long as they're close in a tough SEC. I think the committee's going to pick them because they want the 4 best teams.
Yep.
Alabama has been there for like 10 years now. I think the committee's going to put them in there come hell or high water because there are so many Alabama fans.
People thought about Ohio
and
State,
because it's so
and look who got
controversial.
left out.
There's so much controversy.
Yeah.
Yes, Ohio State has a lot of fans. But nobody says, "Oh man, Ohio State's not there." Everyone wants to see Alabama either win or they want to see them lose.
Had their chance. That's because they
haven't had as many chances as Alabama.
No, but I'm saying they've had their chance. They got embarrassed, right? Yeah, they beat Alabama first year. Congratulations, but they've not consistently backed up their effort.
Well, Brandon's with you. Saying they've had their chance.
But I just don't. I'm just saying, from the people I know who are on the committee. And the feedback, the conversations I've had with them, and I'll tell you what, I'd love to be on the committee because I'd love to be around a panel of people feisting this out because I think it's a good conversation. It's a good conversation to have. What are the expectations? Because and it's only Alabama are you having this. If there is a 2-loss Pac-12 team, if Clemson was to lose 2 games, they're the only team in the ACC you'd even have this conversation about. A 2-loss Miami, forget it. 2-loss Washington, forget it. A 1-loss Washington, forget it, right? Washington really has to go undefeated to even be able to make it to the playoff. I mean, they played Alabama in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, end up losing. Of course, that was when Jalen Hurts was still at Alabama. But I don't think that... Let's have this conversation midway during the season. Let's have this conversation after LSU.
I'm not saying Alabama's going to lose too, but if they do, I think that much equity.
But see, the reason I'm telling you this is because that game's November 9th. If Alabama was to lose 2 November games, there's no way. And they don't even play in the SEC championship. You're having a team who lost 2 games in November. I mean, the only way that's going to happen is if Tua Tagovailoa...
I'm still counting the SEC championship as one of the losses because we know it's likely going to be Alabama from the West. But if they don't make it and they have 1 loss, I still see them sneaking in.
I mean, the thing is...
If we're talking about a loss in the SEC championship and a loss to a team like LSU, that's great.
LSU's going to have to beat Auburn. That's
even A&M.
Way.
If A&M steals a win on Clemson or barely loses to them and doesn't drop very far, and they lose to and Alabama loses to them, they have so much equity because everyone's going to say the SEC West is so stacked, and Alabama has to play all these teams. 2 losses gets them into the championship,
I think
2 losses gets them into the playoffs. I'm with Brandon saying it needs to be 8. I've been saying that since they said 4. I was like, 4 is not enough. 8. Look, if you're the 9th best team in college football, you don't have an argument. If you're the 8th best team in college football, you have a chance to be there. There's usually 5 or 6 teams that deserve to be the best team in the nation, and that's why they need to go to 8. I don't care how you figure it out because they take that month off before they play the championship. I don't care if you play 1 in the middle and the guys get 2 weeks to rest. They play a game, 2 more weeks to rest, and then we go into like the back-to-back weeks like we kind of see right now. It's got to be 8 teams because there are always at least 6 teams in college football that can win.
Well, and I'm going to go into this. I think LSU beats Auburn. I don't think Auburn beats Alabama. I think there's a chance that LSU does beat Alabama. That's at Alabama. So, the only game I'm looking at, that if I'm an Alabama fan and I'm looking at the schedule, I'm honestly not worried about Auburn. Yes, it's in Jordan-Hare Stadium, but the last time Alabama lost in Jordan-Hare Stadium was the same time that Auburn also beat Georgia at home. It was a crazy year. I think Nick Saban's got this team a little bit more humbled. LSU Alabama is going to be a big matchup in Bryant-Denny Stadium, but I'm picking Alabama to go undefeated this year. So,
I'm also saying beware A&M, and I'm saying this before everybody else. And why do I say that? Because Alabama struggles against the spread offenses. We're going to see more of a spread offense from A&M. So you're not wrong. I think Auburn is probably the least of the 3 out of that group.
It is in College Station, but I think that...
Excuse me.
I think Nick Saban knows more about Jimbo Fisher than people think. I think that he's kind of, and I will say this. I think Nick Saban has become an adaptable coach. What do I mean by that? I think he's actually taking time to say, because he was very set in his ways when he first came to Alabama. He was very much like, I'm not going to change my scheme. I'm not going to change how I play the game. Listen, I'm not even going to play true freshman. Now who do we see playing the most true freshmen out of any team this year, week 1? Alabama's playing tons of true freshmen. Alabama's bringing in guys. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa, true freshman quarterback,
well,
right?
it's about time.
Well, yes,
that's all
what
I
I'm
can
saying
say.
is Nick Saban's adapting. I think Nick Saban's saying, we actually need to learn how to cover a triple option team. How many little peewee teams have to come and Bryant Denny and embarrass us and run bleep through the tin horn, or whatever he said,
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
To prove that Alabama, and I think you've seen a team who's willing and has adapted to playing that type of offense. Now, I do think A&M is going to have an offense that will scare Alabama. I don't think it's enough to beat them, but I agree. I think Texas A&M is going to be a better team in the West.
I'm with you. I'm going to go Alabama.
I have them fourth in the West this year.
I'm going to go Alabama is still the team to beat in the West, but I think A&M is going to give them some problems. It might be a surprise game. Ask me when it actually comes up. That's all I want to say.
Let's just say this. Let's just give them a couple more weeks. I mean, they still have...
Absolutely.
Texas A&M has some... I mean, after this, let's see how they play Clemson.
If they get blown out of the water, I'll be like, whoa. Who believes in A&M? Not me.
Clemson's defense not as good as Alabama's. If they can do well against Clemson's defense, then yes, we're going to have this conversation. If they get blown out like 37-0,
just like every week in college football, ask me after week 4.
Yes.
Because I want to see what these teams
after
look
the game.
Exactly. Okay. Guys, we got to get out of here. It's been a great show. It's been a bunch of fun. We talked everything under the sun college football. I know I'm looking forward to the 2 big games this week. There's not a lot of value here, but the 2 games are monsters. I think 12 versus 1 and 6 versus 9 are going to be great games. It would be a big value if
Texas A&M would somehow win. That would really shake up
I would love that. Yeah, that would be fun. Special thanks here before we get out of here. I want to thank Alex, Scott, Jeremy, James, Jonathan, Stephen, Kenny, James, again, or I should say different James, Corey, Sharif, Chris, Charo, another Joseph, Stephen as well, Brandon, Nathan, Frank, Ian. You guys are great. We had a bunch of great comments today. I'm glad you guys stuck with us to talk college football. There were 2. I made sure I didn't get them twice. There were 2 of each, guys. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a fun show. Thank you for all your comments. We're going to be back on Friday to talk about Week 1 in the NFL and all of that comes with that. For Sports Around the Bar, Hannah, I'm gonna kick it to you here. Final thoughts for this week in college football. What are you most looking forward to this week in college football?
Final thoughts. I'm excited to see Ohio State actually have a team worth competing against week 2 against Cincinnati. I'm excited to see maybe a Texas A&M team actually cover the spread, maybe beat a team like Clemson at home. Clemson, of course, maybe have a little bit of arrogant complex right now. At home, these are always the games you want to see. Also excited for USC Stanford. Can USC be the dark horse in the Pac-12 to actually stun the Cardinals week 2, actually have a chance to win the Pac-12? We're looking at Stanford maybe riding the train through the Pac-12 into the playoffs. We shall see.
Now, Brandon, it has been fun, man. Thank you for joining us. Also, Nathan says next week, NFL talk. We're going to be back on Friday to talk NFL. We'll be back Friday, Sunday, and Tuesday to grind out a bunch of NFL. It is definitely the bread and butter of our show.
Well,
we do like to touch college as well.
That's why I'm on Wednesdays, just so I can break down college football, y'all.
It's been absolutely great, guys. We can't wait to see you then. For Sports Around the Bar, I am Jake. This is Hannah.
I'm Hannah.
We will see you guys next time.
See ya.
You even stole Drew's line.